What's up, guys? So I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking about it for a while, and with everything that's been going on lately, as many of you probably know, I recently lost my cousin to suicide. I've started a new job. I haven't really had the time to sit down and write a formal episode of Out of the Shadows, so this is kind of an impromptu episode, I guess. And I guess the biggest thing I'm going to be talking about is there's a lot of dialogue going on out there, particularly from people in the self-help and personal growth arena, talking about medication, how it's not the answer, how it's a bad thing, how there's so many side effects, and this implication that taking medicine, psychiatric medicine specifically, somehow makes you weak or foolish. And I have a lot to say about that. Now, for one thing, if you're dealing with depression and or anxiety specifically, and you haven't taken medication, and you would rather go the route of trying to deal with it without medication, that's absolutely reasonable. You can do that. However, there are a lot of things that kind of go with this. One, if you're clinically depressed, if you're not functioning properly, if you're having trouble getting to work, going to school, maybe you're not doing any of those things, maybe you're in a place where you're literally having trouble getting out of bed. Now, in that instance, I would say, one, you should absolutely be seeing a therapist. I think no matter what route you're taking, whether there's medication involved or medication not being involved, you need talk therapy. Medication in and of itself isn't going to solve the problem. I think it's part of the puzzle in many circumstances. It's, of course, not the absolute answer. Now, the bigger thing, and why I think this is a very dangerous conversation for some of these people to be having, is on a low level. Let's say hypothetically someone's taking psychiatric medication, they watch one of these people and they hear like, oh, well, I guess we could take medication, and there's this, implication that you shouldn't be doing that, or that's stupid or weak or whatever. A small consequence is that person feeling like, well, I'm inadequate, there's something wrong with me, I'm not strong enough, beating themselves up, at least exacerbating the depression at minimum for that day, if not for several days, weeks, whatever. The other more serious consequence, and this is going further down, but it is a consequence, and this kind of stuff has happened. If someone's watching that who has been taking psychiatric medication, for an extended period of time, and they think like, all right, well, this isn't the solution, I don't really feel better anyway, so why am I doing this? And they drop their medication cold turkey. That is going to make your levels, different neurotransmitters in your brain, things like that, drop significantly, very low. And if that happens, you're going to be significantly more depressed, and people have literally committed suicide from that. So it's literally taken lives. So in my opinion, I don't care what your opinion is of psychiatric medication, you need to be aware of what you're saying. I mean, if you go out there and you're like, hey, you know what, I don't believe in it, blah, 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 and you have the disclaimer at the very least of, if you're going to drop your medication, be sure to speak to your doctor, be sure to wean off of it properly. That's fine, that's an option. But if you just throw this out there, and this is the dialect, and this is this assumption, and really what you're doing is you're furthering a stigma. People are already ashamed and embarrassed of admitting to feelings of depression and anxiety, and you're creating more of that, in my opinion. And the big thing is, I think a lot of people in the self-help arena and the personal growth arena haven't dealt with depression on a significant level. And that's fine, that's okay, but when you haven't dealt with it, when you haven't been through it, and you're making these statements and having these convictions, but you don't have any actual experience, that's absurd. That'd be like me sitting here trying to give a thesis, shall we say, on schizophrenia and the effects of it and what happens and blah, blah, blah. I don't know completely. I don't have schizophrenia. I shouldn't say that. I have met people briefly, but at no length that would make me an expert. So I can't speak to that, and I certainly can't speak to that as if I have firsthand knowledge. Now, what I do have firsthand knowledge of is severe depression, bipolar disorder, at least in the fact that I have had 2 episodes of mania, which is the high end of bipolar disorder. Many have the conception that bipolar disorder means that, 1 second you're super happy, and then 1 second you're just crazy and angry. That's not how it goes. There are people who are what you call rapid cyclers, who their moods do change kind of fast. However, in my experience and people I've talked to, that's a rarity. Typically, you cycle. You're very depressed, then you go into mania, which is very high energy. There's feelings of euphoria that can be associated with that. It could be high irritability. There's irrationality. There's a lot of things. And the reason I bring this up is because something like bipolar disorder, if you're experiencing things like psychosis where you're having hallucinations or you're delusional, kind of disconnected from reality, or in a situation like schizophrenia, something like that, again, you have a disorder in which medication is necessary. You're not going to talk those things away. You're not going to be in this state of mania, as like I said, I have been in the past. You're not sleeping, you're not thinking rationally, you're very high energy and kind of all over the place. You're not going to sit down and talk about that and just, oh, now I'm good. Fine. Medication is absolutely necessary in those situations. There may be alternative treatments that are out there. I don't really know of any. The only one that I can actually say that I know of, some people will take supplements to control at least bipolar disorder. I've heard of that. It does take longer than taking psychiatric medication. It won't kind of curb your symptoms as fast. Again, that's at least an option. But I left a comment the other day on someone who is a personal growth advocate and who honestly I've lost a lot of respect for. I'm not going to name names, but again, it was this very much like, oh, well, medication's a temporary solution. I'll give the person that. At least they had the wherewithal to say something of that nature. But I just said, and I even said in my message, like, hey, I'm not trying to attack you, but what do you think about situations like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia? What do you think the solutions are there? Would you say medication is necessary? And, I just kind of said, I was like, well, I think it would be. And I was like, hey, I'm not, like I said, I'm not dissing you. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are or what you know, because I believe that it is necessary. The response was, it doesn't matter what you believe. It isn't necessary, or maybe that wasn't the exact verbiage, but basically implying it's not necessary. There have been studies of blah, 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 refer to X, Y, and Z, and you can see this, that, and the other. Okay, fine. One, it was a very aggressive response. I was like, I totally said I wasn't trying to be aggressive and I just want to have a conversation. But also, two, yeah, there might be, I'm sure there's things out there that are being researched that aren't publicized or mainstream. But again, because of that, you can't say, well, these are in the works or this is going on. So what I'm saying, totally fine. Totally fine. You don't need it. That wasn't exactly what the person is saying. I'm not going to say that, but it wasn't a very helpful response, in my opinion. And of course, kind of circling back to everything that's been going on, as I said, I lost my cousin to suicide recently, and mental health issues, mental illness is in our genetics. And there is a biological factor. There are a lot of things out there that talk about, you can have the genetic code, but it won't be turned on unless you have certain trauma, which I don't disagree with that. I do disagree. I mean, I do agree with that. I think trauma does kind of turn it on. But point being, I do believe, I know that at the very least, my cousin struggled with depression, which unfortunately I was unaware of. I did not realize that he struggled with it to the extent that he did, and I wish that I had known. However, point being, he did struggle with it on a level where I think that medication as an intervention could have really changed things. Therapy absolutely could have changed things, and this could have been prevented. I don't mean that in the sense that like, oh, well, I should have known, or so-and-so should have known, or his significant other, or his family, his immediate family, or anyone. No one should have known. You can't know that, people, as in most cases that I've heard of, it's unexpected. You don't think that was going to happen. But the point is, formal treatment as an intervention, I really do believe could have stopped this. And I think that because of the way society is, yes, we've come a long way. If you go back generations, they talked about it far less than we do. But still, there is a big sense of shame and discomfort and fear in admitting I have depression, I have anxiety, perhaps I have a more severe, or maybe not severe even, perhaps I have some kind of different mental illness. There's a lot of negative feelings associated with that. We're afraid to admit it. We're afraid people are going to think that we're crazy, or there's, oh my God, psychiatric medication is only for people who have something significantly wrong with them and are clinically insane or whatever. And that's not the reality. There's talk about a lot of issues out there, and this is absolutely not at the forefront. And I'm very passionate about it, and it really, really frustrates me. And especially now, losing someone close to me, if there were a more public dialogue, that didn't have to happen. And it's not just in regards to my cousin, it's regards to anyone. People are suffering in silence. There are other cases of this going on every day, I'm certain. And the things that we focus on in our media, of course some things are important, but some are so innocuous and just there's no reason for it. Yet this issue is still in the shadows. It's part of why I came up with Out of the Shadows. I'm trying to raise awareness. So I guess the main thing is, and with anyone, guys, if you're not suffering from depression and you know someone who is, and say they've started medication or something like that, the first thing, don't ever say to them like, well, I don't think you should do that, or well, I think pills are a bad idea, or can't you try this naturally, or whatever. As I said, you can do things. If you haven't taken medication, or if you've been weaned off properly, absolutely you can try without it. And I'm not saying that it is a necessary part of everyone's treatment. It isn't. And I would venture to say that the non-medication aspects are more important. Talk therapy, things like meditation, journaling. There's a million techniques, but those I think are more important than the medication. However, as I said, in many cases, medication is necessary. I take medication. I take it every day. I take it at the same time. Not embarrassed to admit it. I have a mood stabilizer, which is what keeps me out of mania, the high end of bipolar disorder, and anti-anxiety medication in my pocket right now. I will take it before I walk into work, one of them, and I will take it when I get home. And that's what it is. And that's what enables me to function and to do what I'm doing now, to be able to speak out about this. And for as much hardship as I've been through, I'm grateful in the fact that I've had these experiences, and not just with depression and anxiety. I think so many people have had those experiences, at least on some level. Everyone experiences depression and anxiety on some level. Many experience it on a deep level. Having had the experience of the mania, which goes with bipolar disorder, I think enables me to have a pretty significant insight. I can speak to the fact of it being a very scary feeling that, you've been to a place where you weren't quite yourself, where you weren't really thinking clearly, and I know also the worry in the back of my mind at times, like, oh my God, what if that happens again? And really all you can do, or all that I do anyway, is I think, well, I can't live in fear of this and not live a life. And I try and be as aware as I can. There are warning signs if you're kind of going into that phase, and I have made adjustments, obviously, with my doctor when I mention those kind of things, like, hey, I noticed this. I don't want this to mean that I'm going up to that level of the danger zone, shall we say. And we've adjusted things, and it's abated the symptoms, and they're good. Anyway, the point of that long story is I do have an insight into this. I'm not just someone who's talking, who's read things, who's seen things, who's has all this secondhand information, and I have the answer, and that kind of garbage. And I'm also 1,000% willing to have a conversation, and you are hard-pressed to engage in a conversation with me and have me tell you, no, that's absolutely wrong. Perhaps if it was something really absurd or whatever, but as long as it is a constructive conversation, I'm not that person. I'm never going to say, well, that's stupid, or you don't need to believe it, that's what it is. That doesn't do anything. So, alright, the point of this video, and I guess in some ways, looking at the length, this is equivalent to the length of a genuine Out of the Shadows video. So I'm going to post this. This is obviously, I'm sure you'll be watching this on IGTV on Instagram. I'll put this up on my YouTube channel as well. But the whole point is create awareness, be open-minded, guys. Support those you love who are suffering from depression or any kind of mental illness, really. And don't make assumptions. As I said in a previous video this week, do not start from a conclusion. You don't know. You don't know. Not just with this, with anything. If you haven't had the experience, you cannot know. I know that about myself and my life and various other things. It's easy to look at someone else and be like, well, why don't you just do this? There's a million reasons why maybe they don't do that. You know, it's natural. We all have this kind of judgment machine going on, and it's very hard to quiet that down. But give people the benefit of the doubt, I guess is what I'm saying. And if it's something where you're going to weigh in and give your advice, definitely think about the fact that you may not know. And support the people you love. Do your best not to say something that's going to hurt the situation rather than help it, especially in terms of what I'm discussing in terms of depression and things like that. All right, well, I hope everyone's having a good Friday thus far. That is the day that I'm filming this. I have to go into work relatively soon. So until later, be well, my friends.